Hi and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week we are talking all about how to stop ruminating. You know, when you are stuck constantly overthinking the same negative thoughts and it completely stops you from taking action and leaves a black cloud over your day. Well, in this teaching, we're going to help you understand why you keep on ruminating and what you can do right now to break this harmful habit so you can start living a more positive and productive life. Okay, David, so let's begin with some definitions. What exactly is rumination?
Well, I come across this a lot, with my clients where they're stuck on a line of thought or what we call the carousel of despair, that they're going round and round as on the same thought process and the same belief. Now, one of the important things about this is the inner child's part of your mind really wanting to connect to familiarity. It sticks to what it's familiar with. Even if it knows it has negative outcomes, it will perceive that that's much safer, much more secure to stick with what it knows. And then it goes into this kind of pattern of thinking. Probably it's been doing right through your life, this way of sticking with what it knows. Here comes, we know this term, don't we? Better the devil you know.
Yeah.
Better the devil you know. Let's stick with what's known rather than trying to go on the unknown.
So why is it then, I get that the inner child or that part of our mind likes to stay with familiar thoughts. It doesn't like to move out of its comfort zone. It doesn't trust the unknown. But why can't the inner child get stuck thinking positive thoughts?
Well,
why does it have to be negative?
Yeah, it really surprises me because it's so used to it, because it's formed this belief system, Alex, and this is why it gets so confusing for many of my clients, because they can be positive about all other things and other people, but about themselves, that they've set up this belief structure of, I'm not good enough. So again, have you ever said this to yourself? I'm not good enough. I can't cope. I'm unlovable, or I'm unworthy. And so it almost has to become what I call a self-fulfilling prophecy. You call confirmation biased. It'd be counterintuitive to think positively about themselves, because they'd be going against themselves. And one of the things the inner child really wants is to be right. Wants to prove itself right. And even if it's wrong, it wants to be right.
I mean, that is like totally self-sabotaging then, isn't it?
Well, that's what self-sabotaging is. The inner child will, often when I'm working with my clients, they don't do this, of course, but I get this image of their inner child going, no, I'm not going to move. That's why I like the metaphor of the inner child. It's like that part of the mind is acting just like a 6-7-year-old where you want them to do something. No. And even if you prove to them that it's not working, and they'll even agree it's not working, but they'll blame somebody else. Well, it's not me. Well, that proves I'm not good enough. That proves I can't cope. That proves I'm unlovable. And that's why the inner child work is so vital for your emotional and well-being and your mental health.
David, when we're ruminating on negative thoughts, you've just said it's normally negative thoughts about ourselves. We're trying to prove a point. We're trying to obsess on the kind of imbalanced beliefs that we hold about ourselves. But I'm thinking a lot of people also ruminate on negative thoughts about situations or people around them, like worst case scenario outcomes. Does that still tie in with what you're saying about the inner child?
It absolutely does, Alex, because what they're doing is they're looking at all the possibilities and they discount, I call it cherry picking in my model, they discount all of what may be the positive and they focus on the negative, and then they keep on going to the worst case scenario. It's always the worst case scenario. And they'll say things to me when I'm working one-to-one with a client. Well, it's better to be prepared. That's what they'll give you. That's what the inner child will give you. Let's be prepared for the worst case scenario. But the problem with that line of thinking is there's always an even worse case scenario. So they will ruminate and they will think, yes, but what happens if this? What happens if this happens? I've got to be prepared for this. And the justification they'll give me is, well, I've got to be ready. It's safer. It's more secure. But I can't understand how you can be ready for all of these worst case scenarios. Because again, it's like, this is why it's called the carousel of despair. It's like a hamster on the wheel. You keep on, and once you, I used to do this a long time ago. I used to work with my clients and go through the worst case scenarios and disprove it. But I've stopped doing that now because that's just a total waste of time. Because guess what? As you disprove one worst case scenario, they invent another one.
And that's like the whack-a-mole game that you talked about before. You knock down one worst case scenario because you've looked at the evidence and actually it's fabricated, and then another one pops up. And then you just spend all your time playing the game with the inner child. It's like playing the inner child's game, isn't it?
And at the end of the session, you've done a complete session disproving or taking apart their worst case scenarios, and then they've just invented three more others worst case scenarios. I used to call it a long time ago, well, what happens if Martians land? Because that's what it's like. Everything you come up, well, that could happen, couldn't it? Well, Martians could land, couldn't they? Or the world could come to an end, couldn't it? Or, things will happen. And the inner child will ruminate on those. And then it gets kind of very internalized, if you notice this, where you even won't share it with somebody else, but you'll be stuck. The inner child part of your mind, and this is what I mean by ruminating, the inner child will keep on running these scenarios until they become kind of real. He kind of makes them, or she makes them very real, and you stop challenging them yourself and you just accept them. You just accept them to be true. And then if somebody like me comes along and starts to take them apart and see that they have no value, they have no worth, the inner child will just invent others. And what it's trying to do is to make itself, what we call in our model, future-proofed. It wants to be future-proofed. It wants to know that if any possible scenario, it would have an answer or a way out. Well, of course it can't. But then here's the perverseness, which is hard to explain. It's stuck in this rumination, and the rumination becomes familiar and known, and it doesn't want to move. And so and this is when people say, I don't understand why I can't move on. And this is because you're choosing to favor the familiar. And then my clients will say, well, I'm not choosing this. I hate this. That's why I've come to you. I want to do something else. But I'm saying, well, what's stopping you? This is just your thinking, your belief system that you're choosing to do. And the only problem here is the inner child's in control.
And I think as well, when we've spent a certain amount of time getting very, very comfortable in this rumination habit, the prospect of stepping out of it into the scary unknown, because we've created and we've now bought into the belief that the world is a very scary place, and that we're going to fail, and that we're not lovable, and we're not going to cope, and we're not good enough, and all the stuff the inner child gives us that we sit and go in on ourselves with, and we're into like a black vortex. We can go deeper and deeper and deeper into it if we don't put a stop to it. And then the prospect of stepping out of this, out of the rumination, we then get the red light emotions. The red light emotions, because it's like we've bought into the story that actually literally we cannot move from where we are because we're like so tightly bound in by the lies that we told ourselves. We just get so many red light emotions. It seems too emotionally painful.
Well, this is where the inner child is so clever. I mean, your inner child is so clever because then it will say things like, and even a client just today said this, oh, and she sighed and she dropped her shoulder and she said, whoa, this is going to be hard work, isn't it? There's a lot of work here. And I go, well, what's the work? It's just your belief. Yeah, but there's a lot of work to change a belief, isn't there? Well, not really, because it's just your belief. Is your belief true? Is it honest? Has it integrity? Would you say this to your physical child? This is what I said to her. And she said, you're joking. She eyes open wide. And she said, you're joking. I would never say this to anybody else. And I said, well, why do you say it to yourself? And you could see that this is almost like sometimes when I'm working with my clients, you can almost hear the mind going, and as it changes, because they view themselves through a different lens of the inner child. And really the work and the golden thread and the Wu Wei Wisdom work is to change that perception, that filter that you view yourself on, and to see it that it's just built on this very kind of corrupted, if you like, way of looking at yourself as in the world. And it's built on these, what we call the three lies. I've never yet met a client that one or all three of these lies aren't involved. I'm not good enough. And this is very important. If you're interested in this work, ask yourself truthfully, don't speak to anybody else. Have you ever said that to yourself? I'm not good enough. I can't cope. It's too much for me. I shouldn't be able to do it. It should be other people should make it right for me. It's down to them. I'm unlovable. I have no worth. Same type of thing. My client today was, I have no worth. I'm unlovable. And when we got to speaking to her inner child, this is what she's saying. It's not my responsibility to love myself. It's other people. Mm-hmm. They have to love me. It's not fair. It's not right if they don't love me. And then she gets stuck in the rumination, the carousel of despair, of not saying, I don't understand. This is what she said. I don't understand why I'm not successful. And then when we did the golden thread, she then said, well, I don't deserve to be a success. You see, so all of the time, she builds up these counterintuitive, these conflicting beliefs are going on in the mind. And these conflicting beliefs create very intense, strong red light emotions that you may want to call fear, being scared, being anxious, being overwhelmed, whatever word you want to call it. I prefer red light emotions. But you'll get hooked into this rumination, this going round and round, constantly thinking the same thoughts, seeing that there's no way out of the carousel, when the way out is just to self-reflect, look at what you believe and why you believe it. And are these beliefs equal to what you would say, and I use your physical children? Would you say this to your physical child? And of course, the answer is no, of course I wouldn't. It would be harmful. Then why would you say it to yourself? Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying, David, in a way is quite radical, because a lot of therapists and coaches who work on the topic of rumination advocate strategies such as just distract yourself from the negative patterns of thinking. Or they say, oh, well, just make a plan and take action. Just do something, anything. But what you're saying is actually that kind of stuff is slightly superficial if you don't do the deeper work, which is questioning the thoughts and then really digging down deeper to those core beliefs. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. I'm not going to be able to cope. because it's the core beliefs that are driving the surface level rumination thinking, which then in turn creates the uncomfortable, painful red light emotions.
You're absolutely right. And that's what distinguishes the Wu Wei model to other models. We are not interested in the surface emotions, your feelings. We're not interested in giving you a kind of an action plan, because what happens is it works when you're following the action plan, and then a day, a week, a month, 6 months down the line, you drop the action plan and you go back to the core belief. It's the core belief you have to go to, and you don't distract yourself. And this is what my client today said. I've done the golden thread. She's a member of our community. I've done the golden thread. I can see it works. But she comes to this like invisible barrier where you have to get through that barrier. You have to get to the other side, and you have to be able to speak to your inner child. You have to try and understand where it's stuck on the conflicting beliefs. I call it the dual belief system, where it believes one thing about itself, but it wouldn't believe it about someone else. And that's what you have to address, because that dual belief system is conflictual, it's paradoxical, it has no value, because you jump from one to the other. And this is what creates the carousel of despair. And I say that one of the core issues why Wu Wei Wisdom is different is because of the spiritual element. And by spirituality, that I call Shen, I do not mean supernatural, I do not mean religion, I do not mean angels, crystals, anything outside of yourself. What I'm saying quite firmly is you have this amazing spiritual nature, something you can't see, something that's non-material, but very powerful. And if you have this dual belief system at the core, it disrupts that spirituality, because you're being hypocritical. You're saying one thing about yourself, I'm not good enough. You would never say that about your child. If your child came back from school and said, Mummy, Daddy, I've only got 5 out of 10 on my math exam, you would not say to them, well, that's because you're not good enough. And that's what you have to change to yourself. I know some people will be screaming and saying, but that's what my parents did say to me, David. They did tell me that. But does that make it true? And that's only that you can be accountable and responsible for. Even if your parents, when you were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, said to you, you're not good enough, you're unlovable, you'll never be worth nothing. Your choice to break this rumination is to say, does that make it true? And I'm saying no. I'm saying definitely no, it does not make it true. You are an amazing, unique, amazing human being. Awesome. There is no one in the universe like you. You are totally unique. I do not care what your parents said. It doesn't make it true. Don't make those beliefs that you were told as a child as part of this rumination of going round and around looking for someone else to make it right for you. Because the truth is, no one else can make it right for you. And this is what this client said today. If she believes she's unlovable, then no one can tell her that she is lovable. It can't work. And that's why she suddenly looked and said, that's why I can't have a good relationship. Exactly. It can't work because you believe that it's not your responsibility. And so therefore, if somebody else says you're lovable, well, it's not your responsibility to believe them. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It can't work. And so you ruminate, you think, oh, well, this one, oh, and you start to pick faults with your partner. You start to look at the problems. Oh, he didn't do this. He should have done that. He didn't recognize my birthday. He didn't recognize, oh, he doesn't do this. You start to self-sabotage.
Yeah. And all the while it's basically the inner child just wanting to stay stuck
Stuck.
And stay with the same patterns of thinking, which from what you said we develop in childhood because of our childhood experiences, and we just haven't updated them. And so what you're advocating is this: to first of all identify the thoughts. What are the thoughts that I am actually ruminating on that are giving me the red light emotions? Then question them down using the golden thread process that you use with all your clients, and get down to the core belief that's driving it.
Yes.
Now, one thing I know the inner child will often say is, and you've touched upon it briefly, it's beneficial to ruminate and to think about things carefully, because that's how we learn. That's how we ensure we're doing the right thing. That's how we should reflect on things. We should be careful. Are you saying, David, we've just got to not think things through, throw caution to the wind?
Well, no, of course I'm not saying you shouldn't think things through. But what you said is not what the inner child says in a lot of cases.
Okay.
The inner child will say, we've made a mistake in the past.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So therefore, we've got to make sure that we never make a mistake in the future.
Yeah.
And of course, you can't be sure of that.
Yeah.
So the inner child then ruminates. So the inner child's saying, we've made a mistake before, we've got something wrong before, so we have to make sure that we're perfect. Here's the inner child.
Yeah.
And therefore, we can't make a decision in case it's not perfect.
Yeah.
And so therefore, it's stuck on the rumination. So what I'm saying, to answer your question now, of course, in the Wu Wei model, you're reaching your goal, what you want, your projection, you're moving forward, you're in your flow. So you take proper care of making decisions. But you can't do that if your starting position is, I can't get it wrong. I've got it wrong in the past, so that means I will get it wrong in the future.
Yeah.
How can you move forward?
Yeah.
Because you've already told yourself, I'm going to get it
disaster.
wrong.
Yeah.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
So in a way, this is what you've got to understand. You're almost creating a scenario where you have to get it wrong to prove yourself right. Can you see what I'm saying? So the inner child always wants to be right, correct. So it can't be successful if it's telling itself, I'm going to be unsuccessful. It can't prove itself right. It can't prove. It gets so confusing.
It's a no-win scenario.
It's a no-win scenario. And so what you have to do is you have to do the inner child work first. Please, please don't do what this lady did today. Cut your inner child off. Punish your inner child. Ignore your inner child. You've got to. She asked me a great question. She said, is there a difference between reparenting and reconnecting? I said, well, not really. It's the same thing. You have to understand your inner child. Your inner child is not out to get you. It's not out to mess up your life. It's doing what it believes is the best for you in a way that it wants to keep you safe. That's its overriding kind of method. It wants to keep you secure. And so what it believes is if we ruminate, if we procrastinate, if we go round and round in circles, then somebody on the outside, like a fairy godmother, will waft in, wave her magic wand, everything will work out the way we want it to, and then we'll move forward. But of course, that's never going to happen. So we'll stay where we are, because though it's negative and it doesn't work, at least we know it. It's known. It's familiar. Do not underestimate that word familiar. And it's sometimes with some of my clients, it will go even farther. You know what they say? It's easier.
Yeah.
It's easier to self-sabotage. It's easier to ruminate. It's easier to think and think and think and think and think again and then think some more and then think again. It's easier because it's known. It's like a comfort blanket. And then I can blame everybody else. I can blame my childhood. I can blame my parents. I can blame my partner. I can blame my colleagues at work. I can justify it. But I'm stuck in this circle. It's time to stop it. You've got to stop this now. This is not going to work for you. You're not reaching your potential. You cannot flourish with this way of thinking. And I want you to flourish. And I know you know this. You know this, what I'm saying. You know it's complicated and you've complicated it. I'm trying my best to uncomplicate it for you because you have to base yourself in truth, honesty, integrity. That's Shen. When your self-talk, what comes out of your mouth, don't say one thing to somebody else and then one thing to yourself. Don't treat your physical child different to you would treat your inner child. And that's why I like the metaphor of the inner child. I want you to think of yourself as the spiritual parent to your inner spiritual child. My goodness, they need help. They need a good parent. They need a good teacher. They need someone to hold their hand. They need someone to explain to them really what love is. They need someone to teach them that you create love for yourself, baby. And you and me are a team together. And stop this rumination. Stop this going round in circles. And we work on this together. And I'm listening to you. And I'm working with you. And that's the life lesson on rumination. It's to don't be drawn into this quicksand of going around and look at the bigger picture. Instead, going as a teacher, as a parent, and help that part of your mind.
Thank you, David. And we've done many, many more teachings on inner child work, inner child reparenting, and also others on self-sabotage and worst case scenario thinking and perfectionism. So I will put links to all of those in the show notes if you'd like to develop and do more work on this topic. I do hope you have benefited from this teaching. Please do comment and let us know, and perhaps share the teaching with someone else who you think may also benefit. David works every week by Zoom call with clients all over the world on these sorts of issues. And if you'd like to learn more about David's one-to-one consultations, I will also put a link to those in the show notes as well. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we would love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.